Progress.
Okay, so good day and everyone. So for today, we're going to have a discussions of a multiple event listeners, gestures, running the gesture app, fragments, designing the top fragment, creating the fragment class, and finishing the meme apps design. So events, of course, is an interaction with applications are implemented using events and listeners. So the user or some other application does something that generates an event. So a listener gets the events and respond to it. No? So in Java, we are using a event object base class for all events. We have AWT event, window and interaction events. Action event indicates that a component defined action occurred. Adjustment event, so the adjustment event emitted by adjustable objects. We have item event. It indicates that an item was selected or deselected. We have text event, indicates that an object's text changed. We have component event, a low level event which indicates that a component move, change size, or change visibility. Also the root class for the other component level events. We have container event, indicates that a containers contain change because of a component was added or removed. We have focus event, indicates that a component has gained or lost the input's focus. Paint event, the component level paint event. Window event indicates that a window has changed its status. Input event, the root event class for all component level event input events. The mouse event and key event. Because event has sources which correspond to the component that generate the event. So a while ago, I mentioned about event handling listeners. Now, all window toolkits have events, but they handle events directly. Java uses listeners which is actually object-oriented class version to event handler callbacks function. So other toolkits use an event loop where the programmer has to maintain the event loop. And actually, there are different types of listeners for different events because actually in Java only gives you interfaces and you have to implement the method so that the action you want occurs after an event. So I just want to show you a presentation of an event handling on-click listeners and handle multiple events for Android Studio.
Hello and welcome to this tutorial, and in this tutorial we are going to learn something about event handling. Now an event is nothing but when we are using our Android application and when we perform some action, like if we tap a button or if we drag and drop something onto the screen, or if we double tap the screen, then an event is said to be occurred. Now while developing our Android application, we need to use certain concepts for handling those events, and those concepts are nothing but they are called as the event handling. So event handling is basically used in order to handle the events which are caused due to the user interaction.
If you're here for the first time, please don't forget to visit my page and subscribe the channel. You will find that on my channel there are more than 500 video lectures based on PHP, Mail scripting, Maya embedded language, 3D graphics, from developing HTML, CSS, JavaScript to working on Android, Photoshop, multimedia technology, and so on and so forth. So these tutorials will be very helpful and very productive for you. So don't forget to subscribe, hit that bell icon and receive notifications regularly.
So in this tutorial what we are going to do is that we are going to handle a simple event of clicking a button or tapping a button on your Android application. So basically in this tutorial what we are going to do is that we are going to have a large text and we are going to have a button, and when we tap the button or when we click the button, the content of the text is going to change to something else. So without wasting any time, let's get started with the tutorial. So the first thing which you need to do is that you either have to create a new project or you have to clean up the code from the previous project. So for example, in this I have removed each and every method which we have used, and in the content mail.xml I have removed each and every widget which was present on our activity screen. So once this is done, the next thing which we do is that as we are going to need large text, we simply go to widgets, drag this large text and drop it right over here. Now also we are going to need a button, so go to widgets, drag a button and drop it on your screen. Now once this is done, let's say we want to change the text of these to something else. So simply click on it and go to properties, and let's say this says hello world. The next thing which we do is we go to the button, select it, and inside the properties we change the text to, let's say, click me. Now once this is done, the next thing which we want to do is that we want to set IDs to the text as well as button, and that is because whenever we are using event handling, it is essential for us to mention ID for each and every thing which is present in our activity screen, so that while handling the events we could easily identify those. So in order to set the ID, we simply click the element. So for example, in this case we want to set the ID for the text right over here, so we simply click on it, then go to properties, and we are going to find the property which is named as ID. So as you could see, we have the ID as text view, so we need to change it. So simply click on it and change this to, let's say, my text. And we are going to do the same with the button. So we go on to the button and we want to change the ID. So instead of a button, we give the ID as my button. Now once we are done with this, as you could notice, when we click on the text or when we click on the button, you could have a little light bulb over here, and which signifies that we have a warning. So the next thing which we do is that we want to remove this warning. So you simply click on the text or you click on the button and you click the light bulb, and then just click on this arrow and then click on extract string resource. Now you want to name the resource something. So for the text, let's say we name the text as message text. So once this is done, we click on OK. Now we do the same thing with button. So we click on the button, click on this bulb right over here, then click on this arrow and click extract string resource, and let's say we name it as button text. Then we click OK. So once this is done, the next thing which we do is that if we want to change the text of either this or this, we simply go to our app folder, and inside the app folder we have a folder which is called as resources, which holds the resources for us, and inside this we have the folder which is called as values. Now once we open up the values folder, we have a file which is called as strings.xml. So this file right here is going to store the strings for us. So we simply open the file. So as you could see, we have our text as well as button stored right here in form of a resource. So let's say you want to change the text, or if you want to change the button text, you could just delete the previous text. So let's say we want to change it to hello, and let's say we want to change the button text to, let's say, click here. So we simply make the changes to the strings.xml file, and as you could notice, when we switch to our content mail.xml, the text has been changed. Now the layout part of this program has been done, and the next thing which we do is that we design the main logic behind our application. So in order to do that, we go to this main activity.java file and we remove the imports which we don't require, so as to clean up the code. So as we don't need this, we delete it. And we also need to import certain things in order to handle the events. So the first thing which we want to import is that we want to import the view. So in order to import view, we type import android.view, and we are importing this view. That is because we are going to need it while handling the event. So when we are going to use the view in the event handling, you'll understand the significance of the view. Now we are also going to need the button and text view. So we type import android.widget.button, and we also import the text view. So we type import android.widget.text view. Now once we are done with this, the next thing which we do is that we write the Java code for handling the event. But before directly jumping into the code, I wanted to explain certain things about event handling. So basically, Event handling consists of two parts. The first part is going to be listening to the event, which is also called as the event listener, and the second part is called as the callback method. So what happens is that the event handling usually has an event listener which is always going to listen to the event, so that when the event occurs, it is going to call the callback method, and the callback method is going to consist certain lines of code which is going to be performed when that particular event happens. So basically the event handling part is divided into two things. The first thing is going to be the event listener, which listens for the event, and the callback method, which is eventually going to execute certain lines of code when the particular event occurs. So in the previous tutorial, what we have done is that we have created the simple interface so that we could use this as an example for event handling. So what we are trying to achieve here is that when we click this button right here, the text right over here is going to change. So now let's go ahead and let's get started with the tutorial. So the first thing which we need to do is that in order to handle any event, we need to first add an event listener, and then we are going to use the callback method. So the first thing which we need to do is that we need to detect the event which has occurred. So in order to do that, the first thing which we need to do is that we need a reference to the button. So in order to get the reference to the button, we simply use the ID of the button. So in order to get reference, we type button, and then the name of our button is my button. Then we type equals in brackets button, which is used for typecasting, and then we find the button by ID. So in order to find the button by ID, we use a method which is called as find view by ID. So we type find view by ID, and inside the ID we are going to specify the ID of the button. So we type r.id.mybutton, and we are going to have a reference to our button due to this line of code. Now once we have a reference to our button, the next thing which we do is that we need to add up an action listener to the button. So as in this case, we are working with the click option or the click event. So basically we add an on-click listener to our button. So in order to add an on-click listener to the button, first we specify the button name. So in this case the button name is my button, and then in order to add up on-click listener to it, we give a dot operator, and then we type set on-click listener, and it is going to add up an on-click listener to our button. Now the next thing which we want to do is that we want to add a callback method inside this on-click listener, and a callback method is basically a method which is going to get called when a click event related to this button occurs. So in order to set up a callback method, the first thing which we need to do is that we need to create an interface. Now in order to create an interface, what we do is that we type the keyword new, then we type button, then we give a dot operator, and we type on click listener, and it is going to add up the interface for us. Now once this interface is set up, we are going to go ahead and we are going to add up the callback method into this interface. So in order to create a callback method, we type public void on click, and in the parameters we are going to use the view. So we type view, and we name our view as, let's say, v, and inside it we specify the code which we want to perform. So the first thing which we need to do is that on click of a button, we want to change the text of my text. So we type text view, and let's name the text view as my text. Then we type equals, and in order to typecast it, we type text view again inside parentheses. So if you know Java, you could understand what typecasting is. And we go out of the parentheses, and then we type find view by ID, and as we are going to need the ID to the button, so we type r.id.mybutton. And now once we are done with this, the final thing which we need to do is that we need to change the text of the large text. So in order to do that, we type my text, which is name of our text. Then we use a method which is called as set text in order to change the text. So we type my text dot set text, and inside double quotes we specify the text which we want to display. So let's say we type button click. Now I think I have by mistake added this parentheses and the semicolon, so I go ahead and delete it. Now once this is done, we save our code. Now I think I have done a simple mistake right over here. So this actually should not be my button, it should actually be my text, as we are going to change the text of the text view and not the button. So here we type my text. Now once this is done, the next thing which we do is that we save the code and we run our code onto the emulator so as to check if we have done everything correctly. So let's go ahead and run our application on the emulator. So as you could see, we have our application up and running on the emulator. So the text which it is displaying is hello, and the text on the button is displaying click here. Now if you click the button right here, the text here is going to change to button click. So basically we are successful in creating an action listener for this button right here. So when we click the button, the text right here changed. So we are successful in creating our application. So basically in this tutorial we have used event handling concepts in order to handle a particular event. So basically an event is nothing but some user actions like click of a button, double tapping a button, or any other activity performed by the user. So basically in event handling we have two parts. The first part is going to be the event listener and the second part is going to be the callback method. So basically a event listener is nothing but it is a listener which keeps on listening for some event to happen, and when that particular event happens, it is going to perform a set of code which are being listed inside the callback method. So in this tutorial our main intention was we had a text right and we had a button right here, and when we clicked on the button we wanted to change the text right here. So what we did is that we have added a click listener to this button right here so that when the click event happens we change the text. So in order to change the text, what we have done is that inside the callback methods we have specified the code in order to change the text of this text area right here. How you could add multiple event listeners to a single activity. Now in the previous tutorial we have handled a single event and that event was of a button click. So in order to handle a button click we have used a listener which is called as the on-click listener. So on-click listener is basically a listener which identifies when a button is clicked. So what we had done in the previous tutorial is that we have created the on-click listener, we have created the interface for the on-click listener, and then we have added a callback method into it. So what used to happen is that when we used to click this button right here, the text here would change. Now in this tutorial we are attempting to add one more action listener, and that is going to be the long click listener. Now the long click listener is different from the on click listener. So for example, when we click the button once, the on click listener gets activated or it detects a click. But in case of a long click listener, when we click this button and hold it for a few seconds, the long click listener is going to get activated or it is going to detect a long click for us. Now in order to create a long click listener, the syntax is pretty much the same as the on click listener, but there are few changes at some places. So in order to create a long click listener, we initially give the button name, which is my button. Then instead of using the set on click listener, we are going to use set on long click listener. So we type dot set long click listener, and inside it we are going to specify the interface. So the next line of code which we type is new button, as we are going to add it to the button, dot on long click listener. Then we are going to give two curly braces, and within these curly braces we are going to write in our callback method. So the callback method of the long click listener is going to be a bit different than the on click listener. So basically instead of public void, this method is going to return a boolean value. So in order to create a callback method for this, we type public boolean, as it is going to return a boolean value, either true or false. Then we type on long click, and inside the parameters we specify the view as we have done in the above case, and in curly braces we are going to specify the line of code which we want to execute. So in this case, when a user holds on the button for a long period of time, for let's say a few seconds, 2 or 3 seconds, then we want to display that this was a long click, and the text which we are trying to change here is going to be the my text. So basically we need a reference to my text, so we type text view my text equals, and we typecast it, so we type text view, and then we type find view by id, and inside it we specify r.id dot my text. Now once we have the reference to the text, the next thing which we do is that we set the text of this text view. So in order to do that, we type my text dot set text, and set text is basically a method which is used to change the text, and inside it we type long button press. Now once this is done, the next thing which we need to do is that as this is a boolean, we need to return some value. So at the end we type return, and we have to return some boolean value. So let's return the value true. So we type return true. Now once this is done, we are pretty much done with adding the long click listener. So we save the code and we execute it on the emulator. So as you could see, our application is up and running on the emulator. So when I click this button right here, the text changed to button clicked. And when I click and hold this button right here, it is going to display the long button press, and that is because we have used the long click listener, which is used to identify long clicks. So that's how you implement multiple event listeners in a single activity. So in this tutorial, what we have done is that along with our on-click listener, we have added another action listener, which is nothing but the long click listener, which listens to the longer clicks. So right below this action listener, we have added up another action listener. So the basic structure of both the action listeners is one and the same. There are a few changes, such as the name of the listener. And finally, the major difference between the two listeners is that the callback method for this listener actually returns nothing, so it is specified void here. But in case of the long click listener, we need to specify, or we need to return the boolean value. So what we have done is that we have simply returned the value true at the end of. So that's it for this tutorial, and I hope you guys understood how you could add multiple action listeners to an activity so that various activities could be detected separately.
Okay, so this will be an additional discussion on how we'll be able to utilize multiple event listeners in Android programming, specifically in mobile, smartphone.
Listen for multiple events or different events with the same widget. So of course, a click isn't the only thing that we can do with this button. We can also hold it down, we could also fling it, we could drag our finger across it, we could do a bunch of different things to it. So in this example, I just showed you guys how to set up an on-click listener. Hey button, wait for someone to click you. But what if someone takes their finger and they just hold it down on the button? Well, that's not a click, but it is a different event. So anytime you want to listen for a different event, it's really easy, but there's some weird things as well that I'm going to talk you guys through. So go ahead and take that. Again, I probably should mention this. Make sure that you are outside your entire listener and directly underneath it. Bucky's button. What we want to do is we're going to set on long click listener. Now a long click is kind of just like it sounds, but again, a click is when you just press it with your finger real quick, a tap almost. So a click is a tap. Now a long click is whenever your finger is on that button for longer than a second. So it's essentially the same as holding it down. So again, tap, holding it down. Just think of it like that. It'll be a little bit easier to understand. Now for this, what we need to do is we need to make a new interface button. Again, this is on a long click listener. It's a little bit different than this one, so make sure that you don't get confused. Actually, if you ever get an error after you're done typing all your code, it's probably because you got on click listener and on long click listener mixed up. Whenever they're autofilling, they sometimes get confused. But anyways, just like before, public boolean on long click, and we'll just pass it to view v like before. Alright, so again, this is our on long click or holding down, and this is the response whenever we do that. This is how we want to handle it. So I'm actually just going to take this because this is the exact same. And instead of good job Haas, actually right here I'll keep that the same, and I'll write something stupid like holy carp, that was a long one. Alright, so that's pretty stupid. Now there's one other thing that we need to do, because look at this. Why are we getting this little red squiggly line missing a return statement? Well, that's weird, because we didn't have a return statement up here. I mean, all we needed to do is say, okay, this is what we want to happen whenever the user clicks the button. So why do we need a return statement right here? Let's just go ahead and return true to make it happy, and I'll talk to you guys through why we need a return statement. Whenever we have an on long click that occurs on our button, we need to return true, and this is essentially telling Android, hey, I handled this click. The user did something, but we took care of it. Alright, now the reason that we need to do that, because if we didn't, then that event it would be called not being consumed or not being handled. So if an event occurred and it doesn't get handled by this bit of code, then it passes it along to here. So again, if your finger is on the screen and it doesn't occur long enough for an on long click event to happen, then it's going to get passed on to the next listener, which is on click. However, whenever we return true, it says, okay, that finger on the screen event, it was actually a long click instead of a click. So hey, click listener, you can go back to sleep, listen for something else because we already took care of it. So now let me actually go ahead and run this. Alright, so here we are, and the first thing I'm going to do is just click this like normal. So I'm just going to tap it real quick. And of course, whenever I do, as expected, the on click listener kicked in and it said good job, Haas. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold down on my mouse and not release it. And whenever I do that, it says holy carp, that was a long one. So now I'm going to release. Pretty cool. And actually, if you click this again, then it goes back to good job, Haas, because that listener still occurs. So click, hold down, holy carp, that was a long one. Again, what's happening is whenever we're holding down, it said, okay, some kind of event occurred, but okay, we took care of it right here, return true, so no need to check if it was anything else because that event was taken care of. Now for your homework assignment, the next challenge is type in this code exactly like I have, and what I want you to do is pass in return false right here. And whenever you click and hold down, write a forum response and tell me what happens in that case. And if you get it correct, you are ready to move on to the next video. But if you don't get it correct, then do not watch my next video. Goodbye.
So this time what we're going to demonstrate, of course, is the way on how we'll be able to use gesture in Android programming. Because most commonly, let's say, for example, there are some mobile phone that we just use some gestures no applications.
Can be like turning a page. And there's some other ones as well. And one of the special ones actually is a double tap. And that needs its new interface or an entirely different interface. But I'm going to be showing you guys all of them. It's going to be real simple. So the first thing I did is I created a brand new project. I named it Swiper Diaper because I wanted to include the word swiper in it, because I'm going to be showing you guys the swipe. And I don't know, the diaper just kind of popped into my head, so here we are, looking at a blank project with one activity, Swiper Diaper. So go ahead and delete this text view, boom, roasted, and drag out a large text right here. And I'm just going to give this a new ID of, what can I name UID? So many options. How about Bucky's massage? Bucky's message. There we go. Alright, so now we have this text right here that has the idea of Bucky's message, and just because it's annoying me, I'm just going to name this like Bucky's text. Alright, so essentially what we're going to do is we're going to be calling a bunch of different gestures, and I'm going to be showing you guys how to implement them. And for example, whenever we scroll, then I'll just change this text to scroll. And whenever we fling, I'll just change this text to fling. So again, this is the only interface we need, and the text is going to change depending on what gesture we do. Pretty boring app, but it's really useful for just demonstrating this example. So that's actually the only thing that we need to do for this pretty boring design. So now let's hop over to the Java class. Let me get myself all situated. And the first thing I want to do is this. We need to import a bunch of stuff, And after I import it, I'll explain why we are importing everything. So the first thing is import, and well, since we need a reference to that text view, we can just go ahead and import that now, and that's Android widget dot text view. And I have a burp coming in like 10 seconds. Come on, just get out. Just get out, burp. Alright, it's staying down in there. Okay. Now we need to import Android view and motion event. Now two other things. Import Android.view.gesture detector. That is a pretty cool name. Alright. Now import Android.support.v4. Oh, I thought it was going to fill in the entire thing for me. v4.view. Oh, it might. Oh, MG, that was pretty sweet. Wow. I wish there was a program where you could just type tab, tab, tab. Next thing you know, you had like a social networking app. But actually, that would be pretty dumb. So, I don't know. I'm just entertaining myself over here. Alright, so we imported all the crap we need. So why did we import all of that? Well, this is how you detect gestures. What you're going to need to do is you're going to need to implement a couple interfaces. Now these interfaces have methods inside them that are pretty much responsible for detecting gestures. Now you can implement them in a bunch of different ways, but we're just going to use the same class right here. So what we're going to do is implements, and the first one is gesture detector dot on gesture listener. And I'm running out of space, so I'm just going to add a comma. And the other one we want is gesture detector on double tap listener. So again, these are two different interfaces that we're going to implement. And again, this one right here, this on gesture listener, this is for your common gestures like flinging and scrolling and a couple other ones as well. This on double tap listener, of course, you guys probably could have guessed, this is for listening for double taps. So that's what we're going to be doing right there. Now the first thing that I actually want to do is, before we start using these methods that we just implemented, I'm actually going to go above right here, and I'm going to get a reference to this while I remember it. So since we're going to be using it in a bunch of different methods, that's why I just don't want to stick this variable in one of them, since I want to use it throughout a bunch of them. So private text view, and I'll just call this Bucky's message. That is what I called it, isn't it? Yep. Alright, now another thing that I probably should do right here is private gesture detector compat right there, and gesture detector. Pretty good name. And again, you guys know that this variable is just going to be a reference for here, obviously, and this little gesture detector, again, that's the object from the class that pretty much is going to detect gestures, and I'll show you guys later on how to use that. But for now, since we implemented both of these interfaces, what we need to do is we actually need to use those methods. So actually, I'm going to stick those right after the onCreate, just because, I don't know, it just feels right. And I'm going to hit Alt Insert. Now I'm going to hit Implement Methods. So this is pretty much saying, okay, you implemented this interface on double tap listener, so these are the methods from there you have to implement or use, essentially. And on gesture listener, these are the methods that you're using from there. So as you can see, on scroll, on down, which pretty much means your fingers down, on fling, which pretty much means you like fling up like you're scrolling through something. So I'm just going to hit OK, and what's going to happen is it's going to automatically insert all of those for us. So again, that's our promise whenever we're implementing that we're going to use all of those methods. And now we fulfilled our promise, but it's still kind of boring because we didn't do anything with them yet. So the first thing I'm actually going to do is go up to my onCreate method and give myself a little bit of room. Now you need to add 3 lines of code to the onCreate method. The first one is, you guys probably could have guessed, that Bucky's message. You actually need to take care of it right here. So you guys remember how to do this. Don't really need to talk you guys through it. Find view by ID r.id.Bucky's message. So now we got a reference to the message. Now we can actually tweak it whenever we have a gesture. Now, another thing I want to do is pretty much just housekeeping stuff, but this gesture detector, remember that was the object. I'm going to set this equal to new gesture detector compat, and then I pass in this. So again, what this is an object from this class, which pretty much allows us to detect gestures. Simple enough. So the last thing I want to do is set gesture detector, and I'm going to call a method on it called set double tap listener, or set on double tap listener. Now I'm going to pass in this, and what this is going to do is going to allow us to detect double taps as well. So it's kind of annoying that they probably have a good reason behind this, but they separated the basic gestures from the double tap ones. Why they did that, I'm not sure, but they did it, so that's why we have kind of redundant code from time to time. So now all I need to do is this, and this is actually really easy. So on each of those methods that we are implementing, I'm just going to call a quick little, just do this and copy and paste it a bunch of times, I guess. Alright, on single, actually I'm going to do this even lazier. Alright, so essentially what I'm going to do is on each gesture that we're overriding, I'm going to set a little message to change the text on the screen to whatever gesture just occurred. So just like this. And instead of going through all of these, actually you guys can do that. I'm going to pause my video because it's probably going to take like a minute or so, and you guys don't need to see me do the same exact thing like 10 different times. So 1 second. Alright guys, so what I did is I added the functionality to change the text on the screen every time a gesture occurs. Now another thing I want to mention, or by the way, I also added 2 little comments to the source code so you guys can tell when the gestures are beginning and when they're ending, and which is pretty much the default code that was there before. So if you guys are copying the source code from the forum and you see that, that's what they are. So once you have all of your messages set, we need to do a couple more things. The first thing is, you see how all of these return false by default? Well, we actually want to return true on all of those. And remember, the reasoning behind that is because return true essentially means that, okay, whenever this override method occurs, return true says the event was handled. The touch event was handled. If you don't have this return true, then what's going to happen is, for example, whenever you scroll, it's going to say on scroll on the screen, the text is indeed going to change, but the event, that touch event, isn't going to be consumed. In other words, it's going to say, okay, well, you still got to take care of this touch event. Whenever we return true, it says, okay, well, actually, that's all we wanted to do. Touch event taken care of. So it doesn't pass it along for something else to handle it.
Okay, so this time a discussion on how we'll be able to running a gesture application.
Alright guys, So the one last thing that we need to do is we need to override one last method, and this is going to kind of piece everything together. We need to go ahead and I'm just going to stick this at the end of the gestures. Give yourself some space and hit Alt Insert, and then we are going to override a method and make sure that you're sorting alphabetically. Actually, you don't need to do that, but it just saves some time. And actually, remember, this is our direct parent, our superclass. Fragment activity is its parent, so it's like our grandparent. Now, activity, in here, there's a method called where are you at? Where are you at? On touch event. So click on touch event, and then hit OK, and then it says OK. So what you want to do is you want to override this method called onTouchEvent. Now onTouchEvent is the default functionality that gets called whenever a user touches a screen. Now by default, again, this is what occurs. It pretty much just checks for common touches. But what we want to do is we want to say, okay, actually, I want you to detect if that touch was a gesture first, and if so, handle it appropriately, which we already did. So in order to do that, above this right here, type the keyword this dot gesture detector dot on touch event, and what we do is we actually just pass in that event that got passed in through here. So again, instead of just detecting whatever it was like normal, what it's going to do is it's going to take that touch event that gets passed in, the finger hits the screen, and it's first going to detect if it was a special type of gesture, like a scroll or a fling or anything like that, and if not, then, continue as you were. So now all we have to do is run this bad boy. Let me check and make sure I don't have any warnings, and let's see if it worked. Alright, so everything is looking good right now. Let me just go ahead and click down. And as you can see, the longer I click, at first it said on single tap confirmed. And if I hold it down, it says on long press. Now let me scroll up. And as you can see, no matter if it scrolls up or down, we get on scroll. And if I fling, for example, I'm clicking down, then when I get to the top, I'm letting go. Fling, 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 fling. Pretty stinking sweet. This app is awesome as always. The swiper diaper. The swiper diaper. Alright, enough of me singing. I should just teach something for 2 minutes, then just sing for 8 minutes. 10-minute video, pure gold. Alright guys, so now we know how to detect gestures. So your next homework assignment, if you can complete it. Now, enough with these little wimpy assignments. So this is your assignment for now. What I want you to do is I want you to create an interface and have some text. Actually, have some text at the top and have a button on the screen in the middle. Now, I want you to be able to tap that button and have the text change to I got tapped or I just got tapped. That's better. And also, I want you to have the ability to swipe on the side, and that text changes that way as well. So again, text at the top, button changes it, and swiping changes it as well. And if you want to add, for bonus points, a nice subtle blue background, you can do that as well. But there you go. That is how you use gestures, and that is your next challenge. So let's see if you can complete it. When you do, post it on my forum. Thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and I will smell you suckers later.
So this time we're going to have a discussion of fragments. Still, of course, in Android programming, using Java,
Alrighty guys, welcome back to another tutorial, and in this tutorial, what I'm going to be doing is I want to start talking to you guys about something called fragments. Now, a fragment is actually one of the most important parts of Android app development, because what it is essentially it's part of your activity that you can reuse over and over and over again really easily. So say that you have this app and it has, I don't know, maybe 20 different activities, 20 different screens, and you want to create a menu for each one so the user can navigate around a little bit easier. Well, if you want to do that, then what you can do is go in each class and create all the code for the menu. MG, this is going to take forever. Or what you can do is you can create this thing called a fragment, which is pretty much this bit of code that is reusable. So that way, once you have the fragment created, you can just stick it inside every class and you're good to go. And also the benefit of that is, say that, I don't know, maybe you wanted to change the color of that menu. Well, if you just did it the old-fashioned way, then you would say, okay, let me go back to every class and change the color of it. However, whenever you design a fragment, then what you can do is you can only change the color in one location, and then it's going to automatically update across all activities that you used it on. Pretty stinking sweet. So again, a fragment is pretty much part of your activity that's reusable. You can also have multiple fragments on the same activity. So for example, if you want to have a menu on every screen, and I don't know, maybe you're making like a social networking app and you want to allow the user to upload an image from a bunch of different activities, then you can have that fragment on there too. So just remember that you can have multiple fragments on any activity. And actually in this tutorial, what we're going to be doing is I'm going to be showing you guys how to make a really simple meme generator. So, I know I myself really hate memes because they're kind of annoying and they're all over the place. But for this example, it's really easy to demonstrate because I'm going to be having a single activity, one screen, and it's going to have two fragments on it. The top fragment is going to be where you type in the text and then click the button. And the bottom fragment is pretty much going to be the meme. So it's going to be a picture and then it's going to have the white text on it. So again, the top fragment is where you type it in. The bottom fragment is going to be the picture or the meme. So, okay, that was a lot of explaining. So now let's go ahead and get started. So the very first thing we need for a meme generator is, of course, some picture to memeify. So in order to be able to add pictures to your application, go over here to Android and choose Project View right here. Now expand this. Oh, by the way, I probably should mention, I created a brand new project and I just chose blank activity. So that's where I'm at right here. So this is a brand new project. As you guys could see, I named it Meme Creator, but name it whatever you want. So once you're here, again, go to Project View and expand this and expand App. Now inside Source right here, you're going to see a folder called Main. So expand that and also expand this RES folder. So let me show you guys. Alright, so inside here, we're going to see a bunch of different folders, and the one we're just worried about right here is Drawable. So for now, I know I didn't really talk to you guys about adding images to your app, but we can add an image in here, and that way we can use images in our app. So again, I'll talk about this all in detail later on. Again, this is a fragment tutorial. I just want to, have a picture in there real quick. And someone's texting me for some reason. I think people like wait outside my house and they look in my windows to see when I'm making a tutorial, and then everyone just starts texting me. That's what it seems like. But of course, for your image, what you can do is you can actually just go online and get any square picture that you want. But I'm using one from my website. It's my profile picture. I'll show you guys what it is. So there it is. If you want this, actually, if you click the link below, it says my profile, then it has a link to it in the YouTube description. Then you can just download this as well. But anyways, once you have any square image, then take it and drag it in to that drawable folder, and then say, okay, do you want to move this file into your project? Okay, I indeed do. And it says, okay, these files do not belong to the project. The heck they don't. Well, they do now, sucker. Okay, and check it out. So I now have that Bucky image or square image in my drawable folder. So once I have that taken care of, I can switch back to Android and of course check it out. So let me just position this a little bit better. Alright, there we go.
Okay, so this time we're going to have a demonstration on how we'll be able to design the top fragment.
Alright, so now let's go ahead and create our very first fragment. And for this, I'm just going to have the fragment that we're going to eventually put on the top of main activity, and that of course is two inputs, one for the user to type in the top text and one for them to type in the bottom text, and a button. And whenever they click that button, it's going to add that text to the top of the image. So of course it's like going to memify it. So in order to create a fragment, what you need to do is you need to have two parts. The first part is the layout, how the fragment's going to look, and the second part is the Java file, pretty much the brains behind your fragment. So again, even though every single fragment is indeed going to consist of an XML file and a Java class, remember that they're pretty much set up the same way, but you can't just have a fragment standing alone. It needs to be part of an activity. So that's the main difference between an activity and a fragment. You can have just an activity, but whenever you create a fragment, it needs to be part of an activity. So remember that, it's actually pretty important. So anyways, in order to create a fragment, this is what you do. The first thing I'm going to do is actually just create the XML file. So if you go to your layout right here and you right click it and choose new layout resource file, this is pretty much just saying create a new XML file. So I'm going to say okay, click that. And what do you want your layout or XML file to be named? I'm just going to name mine top section fragment. Now another thing I want to do is I actually want to change this root element to relative layout. So I'll show you guys what this does right now. So click OK, and if we switch to text view, we can see that it pretty much just created a blank XML file using relative layout instead of, I forgot what was it by default, linear layout, I think. Alright, so of course this looks like an activity right here, but of course we know that it's a fragment. It's part of an activity that we're eventually going to be adding to something else. So let's go ahead and get creating it right now. So again, I'll create the first input first, and that is edit text. And as you can see, it already fills in a couple attributes for us. So for the layout width, I just want to use wrap content, and also the same for the layout height. And the very first attribute I want to add above all of this is actually Android ID, and for this ID, I'm just going to call it, what can I name this? Something like top text input. Alright, so now we have a very basic input form. So now let's add some other properties just to make sure it's laid out properly. Alright, so it's in the top left corner right now. So if I change Android, oh look at that, layout center horizontal, it already knows what I want to do. Sweet. And change it to true. Then it's going to position it in the middle of the screen. Now another thing I want to do is I kind of want to bump it down a bit because I don't want it touching the very top, as you guys can see it is. So Android layout, actually see if I can find it, layout underscore margin top. And for this, I'll just move it down like 15 dp. That should be good. Alright, looks pretty good. Now, of course, the last thing I need to do is if I want to allow the user to type any text in at all, I probably should make it a little bit wider. So Android width, and I'm just going to change this to 300 dp. Alright, that looks pretty good. So this is for the top, and of course the bottom one's going to be really similar, so we can just copy this and paste it right in there. Now of course the first thing we need to do is we need to give it a new ID, and I'm just going to call this bottom text input, and let's see, the width is the same, the height's the same. One thing I want to do is this. If I do Android layout below, then I can say position this below another item. Well, what item? Well, the only other one we have is this. So position it below top text input, which is right here. Now for everything else, just center horizontal. Margin top means how far do you want to put it below this one right here. So 15 dp is fine. And for the width, of course, the same width. Make sure everything looks real nice and neat. So after this, the one last piece we need for the top fragment is that button. So the button, of course, I'm just going to have this wrap content and wrap content. And of course, it's in the top left right now, which looks really bad. But before we start positioning anything, what I want to do is put Android ID, and for the ID, what ID can I give this? A button. That's pretty creative, eh? Alright, so now we have an ID. Now we can identify it whenever we need to. And actually, why are my freaking line numbers shown by default? Makes me so angry. Alright, so what do we have to do now? Probably add some text to it. Would be nice. So Android text. What text do we want to appear? We'll just say like dank meme, bro. Alright, that button is looking sweet. And I want to add the margin top. And I'm too lazy to type it, so I'm just going to copy. And we probably should lay this out below here. So lay it out below there. Actually, I want to lay it out below the bottom one. Alright, so it's laid out right there and also center horizontal. Alright, so looking pretty good. Is there anything else I need to do? The layout looks pretty sweet, but I do know that there's one other thing that's going to annoy me. So go over in your design view. Alright, now click the button. And of course, that string we typed in, dank meme bro, it's yelling at us because we don't treat it as a string resource. And just name this something like button text. And click OK. So now, that string, it's now a resource, and alright, we don't got any warnings or anything like that. So now that our fragment is designed, what we need to do next is add the Java class to it. The second part that you need for every single fragment, the brains behind the beauty. So that's what we're going to be doing in the next tutorial, so I will see you guys then.
So this time, we're going to have a demonstration on how we'll be able to create the fragment class, no? Because of course we need to understand on how we'll be able to utilize the use or to create or draft or to code, no, the fragment class in Android programming.
Alrighty guys, so once you have the design of your top fragment done and set, what we need to do is we need to add the brains behind it. Of course, for every fragment it needs a layout, which we just did, and the Java class. So in your Java folder, right here, go to your package that holds your main activity, and we want to add a new class. So right click your package, new Java class. Now for the name of this, I'm going to name mine top section fragment. Looking good, hit OK and check it out. And actually what I like to do is I like to arrange all my Java files on the left and all of my activity or layouts on the right. Alright, so this is a file that I just created, and of course I don't need that stupid comment, but what we actually do need to do is we need to import some stuff. So import.android.os.bundle, import android.support.v4.app.fragment, and I'll explain all these as we need them in a bit. But import android.view.layoutinflator, two more ones real quick. import Android view.view and import Android view dot actually I missed it. View group, there it was. Now there are some rules that we have to follow to create a really basic fragment. The very first rule is we always need to extend fragment. So we always need to inherit from this fragment class, and that just tells our app, hey, this thing that we created is actually a fragment. Alright, so another thing that we need to do is we need to override on create view. So if you hit Alt, Insert, Override Methods, make sure this is sorted. Alright, on create view, hit OK. Now of course what this does is it says, okay, so we know that this is a fragment, however whenever you use it in one of your activities, what does this fragment look like? What pretty much layout are you using? So you can actually get rid of this because we don't need any of that. So essentially what we need to say is we're going to be using this XML file. That's all we're going to say. So in order to do that, we're just going to store it in view, and it's a little bit different to tell your app that you're using one of these layouts for a fragment. What you need to do is you actually need to use inflator.inflate, and again this is just a method to say this is what layout we're using for this fragment. Why they named it inflate, I don't know, it's kind of a weird name, but that's what we're doing. So we're using r.layout. What is my name? Top section fragment, which is pretty much a reference to this file right here. And just some housekeeping stuff, you need to pass it in container, and this is just a view group object that got passed in. We're just passing it through, and not false. Come on, jeez Louise. Alright, so after this we just turn view, which is pretty much essentially a reference to this. That's all we're doing. So again, those are the rules whenever you create a class that uses a fragment. First, it needs to inherit from fragment, and second, it needs to override on create view. Alright, so we have one fragment created, one part of our app. So the only other thing we have to do, well, it's not the only other thing, but what we're going to do next is we're going to create that bottom half, which is the good part, the picture, which we're going to memify. So let's go ahead and first make the layout for it, and this is actually really easy, a lot easier than this. So right click a layout and click a new layout resource file, and for the bottom fragment I'm just going to name mine bottom underscore picture underscore fragment, and I also want to change this to relative layout as well, and hit OK. So now let's actually do this through the designer, because I don't know, we really don't need to change that many properties on it. So the very first thing that I want to do is I actually want to say, okay, we're using that one image of me, of Bucky. So on the entire relative layout, what we can do is we can actually go to background property, and if you click these dots, it lets you browse your resources, and they're actually under here. So you can collapse color. Now in drawable, remember that's where we stuck it, and mine is named Bucky, so I'm just going to click that. So this is a reference to this image, and hit OK. And now the background of this fragment is me right there. Now I know it looks stretched out right here, but it doesn't really matter, because this is what's going to happen. Remember, this entire thing, it isn't the screen that the user is going to look at, it's only part of the screen. So whenever we take these fragments and we stick them on the main activity, what we can do is we can say, okay, for this fragment right here, make it square. So we can give it a fixed height and width. So even though it looks stretched out right now, it's going to look fine whenever we actually place it on our activity. So that looks pretty good. Now, the only other thing that we need to put on here is 2 text fields. So let's go ahead and drag one right on top middle and drag another one on the bottom.
Okay, so this time we are going to have finishing the Mimi apps design, no? Because right after this lesson, no, you have an assignment wherein you are required again to do a sample Mimi apps design at the same time.
Alright, so the first thing I want to do is select that top one, and we need to start changing some properties. So the first thing, of course, is the text color for both of these is white, and the hex is FFF, and we might as well do the same thing for the bottom, FFF, enter. Alright, so now both for our text fields are white. Now another thing I want to do is I actually want to change the width of these. So you see how the size of this text field is pretty much matches whatever text is inside. Well, that's kind of annoying me, even though it really won't be a problem. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the layout width for this text to match parent. So I'm going to put match parent, and as you can see, now we can have the text field pretty much span the entire fragment. We're going to do that for both. Layout width, match parent, and of course the only other problem we get for this is now it's on the left. And of course, if you like, I don't know, having your text on the left, you can leave it that way. But typically meme text is right in the center. So I'm going to switch back to that first one. I'm going to set gravity to center horizontal and center horizontal as well. Now, what I actually want to do is, again, for this app, what's going to happen is the user is going to type in their own text, and it's going to pretty much set this text to whatever they typed in. But I just want to change the default text of it because large text looks kind of weird. So for the default text, I'm just going to name this one like top text and this one bottom text. Actually, let's just name it top and bottom. The user, of course, knows that it is text already. Alright, simple enough. So, of course, just so I don't have to look at these stupid little warnings, change this extract string resource, and for the top, I'm just going to call this one top text, even though we never actually use these through our Java code at least. And for the bottom one, where you at, light bulb? There you are. And we will just call the bottom text bottom underscore text and hit OK. So again, I know it looks kind of weird right now, kind of stretched out and kind of goofy looking. However, whenever we take this fragment and add it to our activity and everything is said and done, it's actually going to look really nice. So for now, the only other thing we have to do is remember, there's 2 parts to every fragment: the design of it, which we took care of already, and the Java file, the class. Alright, so creating the class for this is going to take like 2.5 seconds. So right click the package just like you created the class for the other one, new Java class. Of course, I'm going to name this class bottom picture fragment. Alright, it looks good. And now what we can actually do, instead of typing everything again, is just go to, actually let me arrange this a little bit better. Alright, so go to all that stuff we typed out in, I don't know, like 2 tutorials ago or whatever, and paste in all of those imports. And again, remember I said the 2 rules that we have to follow is we first need to inherit from that fragment class, so extends fragment, and the second rule was we need to override on create view. And we already typed all this code, so no need to type it again. Alright, so the one thing that we actually do have to change is this. Remember, on create view is where we tell it what design or what XML file we're using. So right now, we're saying, okay, we want to use the top section for this and the top section for this. Well, for that new fragment that we just created, we actually want to use the bottom picture. So if you go to this little bit of code, you can type bottom picture fragment. So now you have two fragment classes. The first one is made to use this, and the bottom one is using this. So now we have two fragments created perfectly. The only other thing we have to do now is add these fragments to the activity. So go to your activity main XML file, and first of all, delete this stupid default text view. I wish they didn't even include that. But to add a fragment to your main activities design, what you do is you scroll down all the way at the bottom, and under the custom folder, you're going to see this little thing called fragment. So this means, okay, we want to add a fragment to this design. And of course, this is your main activity, your main screen. So click this, and let's just go ahead and add the top one first. So click top section fragment, which is that fragment we just created, and hit OK. So from here, it says, where do you want to place that fragment? Well, let's just go ahead and plop it in the very top center. And now it says, okay, you have a little issue. I don't know what I want your fragment to look like, and I really don't know why this pops up. I think it's going to be fixed in the future tutorials, but if you just click this right here, it says use this one. Then it says, okay, that's what I'm using. That's what, I don't know, this fragment's going to look like. So now, once we have that taken care of, the only other thing we have to do is add that bottom fragment. This one right here. So go back to your activity main layout and pretty much do the same exact thing. So click fragment, choose bottom picture fragment, choose OK, and stick it in the bottom center. Now it says OK. I don't know what your layout's supposed to look like. Just click this link, and it says use that XML file, and sweet. Now I told you guys that since this is actually a fragment and not an entire activity, what we can do is we can change the size of this. So highlight fragment 2, which is that bottom fragment, and if you go to layout, actually you can change both of these. So layout width right now is wrap content, which means however big your contents are, just fit it to that size. But what we actually want to do is we want to give it a fixed height and width, and we want to make it square. So I'm just going to type like 275 dp and hit enter. So that's the width, and actually let me just copy that. Now for the height, 275 dp, since I want this to be square, and hit enter again. Now since it's positioned at the bottom center, that's where it's going to reside. And actually, that's kind of small, and I have a little bit of space, so I'm going to change this to 300. Actually, let me change the height first. Can we go bigger? I think we can go 320. 320. Can you do it without... Oh, yeah. Looking sweet, looking sweet. Oh, my God, I feel like I want to eat. Now drop the beat. All right, so... that is pretty much how we arrange our main activity. So right now, again, this entire thing is our main activity, but it's consisting of two different fragments. The top section fragment and the bottom picture fragment. Pretty sweet.
Okay, so I think that's it for today. So next meeting, we are going to have a discussion about listening for button clicks, no? Communicating with main activity, changing the Mimi's text, no? Dunk memo bro, master detail flow example, and overflow menu. So that's it for today.